So let's get it started today with our first panel. I'd like to invite Anila Ali, who is the founder and president of the American Muslim and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council. Thank you. Come join us. What an honor. Luke Moon, please come to the stage, the executive director of the Philos Project and founder of Generation Zion. David Christopher Kaufman, a journalist who writes for several publications, including the Financial Times, the New York Times, Details, Time International. He also authored chapter text for Pride, 50 Years of Parades and Protests. David, please join us. Thank you. And Moshe Glick, who was the subject of a baseless prosecution after he came to the defense of a Jewish man who was being attacked by a radical pro-Hamasnik. All right, so Moshe, I'm going to start with you, or Dr. Glick, if I may. What shall I call you? Moshe, okay. So we're going to open this panel not with any type of policy arguments, but with a story. Because sometimes one person standing in a parking lot in New Jersey tells us more about the state of affairs than any type of think tank report. So I want to talk about what happened to you to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. And just a little bit of background about Dr. Glick. He is a dentist, a community leader. He intervened outside Congregation or Torah in New Jersey during a very disrupted pro-Hamas protest. He stepped in to defend a fellow Jew who was being beaten up. And he ended up being charged by the Essex County prosecutors with aggravated assault. They even wanted to charge him with bias intimidation. Now, after his lawyers worked very hard and pressure from the community and the End Jew Hatred movement, finally, he was pardoned. He was given a full pardon on Governor Phil Murphy's final day in office. Then the DOJ finally stepped in, filed a federal complaint against the prosecutors under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, the FACE Act, and alleging that the mob had unlawfully interfered with worshipers' right to freely exercise their religion. The FACE Act is exactly the type of protection that Mamdani wants to deny Jewish and minority communities here. So, what were you thinking when you saw a fellow Jew being violently attacked by a Hamasnik and stepped in? What gave you the courage to do that? And tell us about your journey since.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for everything that you've done thus far. I definitely wasn't thinking I'd be looking at 10 years in prison. That was pretty terrifying. But really, I saw an individual that was literally being choked out in front of a synagogue. I saw his legs buckle. I'm a Tzala volunteer as well. He was losing consciousness. Police failed to intervene. We had engaged with the police in advance. Police no-showed. And really, instincts just taken place. I think anybody would have done, I'd like to believe anybody would have done the same thing if you saw a man, a senior citizen, a 64-year-old man, potentially being killed in front of a shul. It's not the first time somebody has been attacked in front of a shul. So at that point, it was really more instinct and I need to save somebody. But really the journey was after the fact. My wife and I never thought that I'd be the one that would be arrested. It was terrifying, and I actually was charged with bias intimidation, which is a second-degree crime. I was looking at up to 10 years in prison. And really, I like where you started the discussion. We've all been to so many conferences. It can't be just another conference if everybody sits down and we talk about all the statistics and how anti-Semitism is through the roof. We've all heard those. But I think of what the sage Hillel said, if not me, then who? And I've been to dozens and dozens of rallies. There's never been a rally where there's been more pro-Zionist Christians and Jews coming together. We're always outnumbered. So I guess the long answer to your question is you have to take action, right? I've met with lots and lots of Holocaust survivors, and I always ask them, what was going on in 1935, 1937, when you saw the world was changing? again, we're not here to judge our ancestors, but I believe more people need to take action. And when an opportunity is presented for you to take that action, we all need to step up. And it can't just be keyboard warriors. Keyboard warrioring is great, but we need to get out to the streets. We need to engage with our local government. And again, you've touched on the FACE Act, and hopefully we can talk about that a little bit more later on. But that's one of the most powerful tools that we as Americans that believe in freedom of religion, which is our most sacred right, need to really get behind. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So, David, as a journalist, I just wanted to get your take on what you see happening in your field in terms of the ethics of journalism. I personally believe that accountability journalism is one of the most important weapons that we have against this pipeline of hatred. Who is doing that? Where does the courage come from to write articles that are actually truthful and factual? And why do we see so many of your colleagues doing the opposite?
That's a big question. I can't answer all of them. I can only speak for myself, and it ties into. That's a tough question. I can't speak for all of my colleagues. I can only speak for myself. I'm motivated by a feeling of outrage all the time, and every time I feel as if I feel as if the outrages can't get worse. They escalate and escalate and escalate. I mean, who could believe that we would have seen a pop star like Julian Casablancas on a subway with an interviewer basically saying that when Jews right now are complaining about anti-Semitism, that they're imitating black people. I mean, that's an escalation of unprecedented proportions. But every week we have escalation after escalation after escalation. I think one of the key things is that journalists have not been, and this is one of the reasons why I love the work of these organizations. You guys are really the first ones to present the struggle that Jews are going through right now as a civil rights issue. And I think that language is incredibly important. I'm somebody who's the son of a Jewish mother and a black father. Nobody would have any problem understanding my existence and my history in America as one of civil rights. But they would constantly push back and expect me to explain and justify this notion of Jews seeking their civil rights. Whereas I know, as somebody who's both, that they are exactly the same thing. And I think that journalists haven't really been briefed in that language. We haven't really seen that type of language been introduced into the journalism field. I think if it was, it would almost make their lives easier. I mean, it's astounding to think that we had to question whether or not Mamdani would authorize protections for synagogues when we would never question whether they would be needed for churches, for instance. So I really think that part of the problem is that journalists are trapped in the past. We haven't done enough of a job to educate them about what we are facing right now. And there's constantly this need for moral parity rather than moral clarity. And I think this is something we need to really, really demand of our journalists, of our government, of our politicians, of our NGOs, and especially of our Jewish leadership, not the folks here who are doing a great job, but other big organizations, that this quest for moral parity has to end. It's all about moral clarity, and that this very much is a civil rights movement. And if we can begin to really, really, both journalists and those of us who consume media, can begin to really, really demand that this is treated as a civil rights issue, that Jews are not asking for any other right than any other minority has in this country. I mean, again, I'll stop in a second, but I think about it, like, this half of me is not asking for any more than this half of me. And why should this half of me settle for it? So I think if we can begin to really explain that through our Jewish leadership, through synagogues, and to get these, what I call sideline Jews, the Jews who've been stuck at the sidelines, to understand that they're Jews too, that this doesn't stop with them just because they voted for Mamdani. I shall stop.
Thank Thank you. Very well said. I truly believe that if there was more truth journalism, especially during the recent war, and now also with what's happening in Iran, we wouldn't see the radicalization. There would be accountability. And thank you for pointing out the civil rights.
And it's important to remember that journalists only deliver what is demanded of them by their newsrooms and, most importantly, by the consumers. We have a lot of power out there. I know it's a cliche, but we've been saying this for 3 years now. Every time we see Hassan Piker in GQ, I want to go to Leonard Lauder and say, when are you pulling your advertising from Condé Nast? They are promoting and platforming a Jew hater. This man supports an ideology that wants to kill you. No matter how many billions you have, it wants to kill you. Pull your advertising. Until we demand that, going to continue.
But that's the point. It's not a matter of the Lawfare Project writing a letter and posting it on social media. The demand has to come from the public. It has to have numbers. There has to be a social demand, which means that every single person in this room has to get at least 15 of their friends to click and sign a campaign that is designed by these wonderful women against that publication. That is the system that we're creating here. Luke, so we were just together at CPAC. Before that, I believe you were also at TPUSA.
I was, yeah.
So, and Matthew had mentioned, I wonder if you could speak about how you trained the 42 activists to go after the groypers. Maybe you can start by just explaining the problem, the capture that we're seeing right now of the conservative community.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been an honor to work and fight alongside End Jew Hatred. We've been on many rallies together over the years, and I'm really honored to be able to be here. Let me tell you, so after the November election, last November, Nick Fuentes went on his show, and he said, the groypers are ascendant. MAGA lost. We're winning. We're going to be at every rally. We're going to be at every town hall. We're going to have every primary, every debate. We're going to be there. And I said, and I'm going to be there too, but I'm going to outnumber you 3-1. That is the goal. And every place there is a groyper, I want 3 Zionists to show up because we outnumber them. We really do. In all the polling, we actually outnumber them. But we sure don't feel like it. And so for me, it's really important that we train people to show up to fight back so that it looks like we outnumber them. And so we trained about, I think, 15 at TPUSA's AmFest. We had a booth. We turned them loose. There was actually a moment at AmFest where actually we had so many people in front of our booth at AmFest that the fire marshal threatened to shut down the event because we were blocking all the pathways, because there was like 150 people in front of our booth picking fights with groypers versus Zionists, and it was like we outnumbered them, okay? And I'm like, well, we did great at AmFest. Let's double our numbers. So it's at CPAC we did 42, and we do training on how to fight them, what to look for. We talk political, we talk theology, how to be ready, how to answer questions, and then we turn them loose on the floor. And I think at AmFest, or at CPAC, we probably outnumbered them, I would say 5-1, 10-1. I mean, there was a point where some, jerk was like, yeah, everybody, all the people under 40, they're against Israel. I'm like, dude, everybody under 40 at CPAC was with me. You don't have anybody here. It was pretty awesome, okay? And I'm telling you what we're going to do next, because it's really important. So at CPAC and at AmFest, TPUSA's AmFest, the college Republican presidents, TPUSA chapter presidents, they get flown there for free, okay? And that's where a bunch of them are groypers. And I'm like, we got to take back that space. So this summer, a few days before the ICC conference in DC, we're going to train 100 students to fight back and take on the college Republicans and run for and take those positions back. So we'll see college Republicans, Zionists in charge at LSU, at Oklahoma University, at every school in the country. That's the goal, okay? And we just got to fight. We got to show up. I love what end-Jew hatred does and the showing up, and I'm on the team.
Well, I love this panel because it's just action, action, action. And Luke, I just want to stay with you for 1 second because what are those arguments? Why all of a sudden are we seeing at lightning speed? We witnessed the capture of the left, the Democratic Party. It took about 5-6 years, maybe if not more. I mean, we've witnessed this in the last year. And the transformation is so rapid. So these arguments, as far as I know, Jews are Israel firsters. Israel is not the Bible Israel. The Jews have lost favor with God. It's almost like a theological replacement that is coming. What are let's say, the top 3 arguments that they're making to sow division between the Jewish community and the Christian community, and how do you respond to them?
Yeah, I call it theopolitical because it actually either it starts theological and politically, or starts politically and ends theological. I think one of the things we're seeing, particularly among Gen Z, is there's a lot of Gen Z who basically became, particularly men, who became conservative. They got red-pilled or black-pilled because of COVID. Okay, so they became conservative, and then somebody comes along and says, by the way, conservative is rooted in the Bible, and then they become Christian. But they don't have what we would call in Christian terms discipleship. No one's kind of shown them the roots of the Bible and Christianity are found in relationship with the Jewish people. And they're just not taught. They're not shown that truth. And so they're in a sense, they're brand new Christians that haven't read the Bible deeply. They don't know, and they're being brought along. You know, on TikTok, the anti-Israel to pro-Israel content on TikTok is about 35-1, okay? On Instagram, it's about 22-1, okay? So just by sheer numbers, we're not getting the same traction, but we're also not losing, okay? One of the things, I cannot stand the pessimism because we are, if you had 9 months ago, I couldn't get anybody to call out Tucker Carlson. On social media, big conservative leaders, I was like, Tucker Carlson is terrible. He's ruining our movement. What are you doing? And they're like, I just can't, Luke. I can't go. Like, he's too big. That was 9 months ago. Now, it's no big deal. Everybody's calling him out, okay? We are not losing. We are winning. And we can either be like Joshua's and Caleb's, or we can be like the 10, okay? They are not giants, and we're not grasshoppers. We are going to win this, and we are going to win this because the truth is on our side, and God is on our side, and I've read the end of the book.
Truth is on our side, God is on our side, and the law is on our side too, which is why we have to enforce it. Anila, I want to start off by telling you I am such a huge fan of yours. Your courage is remarkable, and what an honor it is to be here with you on this stage. I want to ask you a very difficult question as a Muslim woman. What is going on? Is it reversible? The radicalization pipeline that's been happening in this country, right? This stealth jihad, as people call it, that's coming through the mosque, through the educational system. It's coming through, I don't know, some would say perversions of Islam. Some would say this is the true Islam. These are very hard, difficult questions that people want to ask, but they're too afraid to do so because it's politically incorrect. They're afraid of being called racist. They're afraid of being called Islamophobic. Well, here is a safe space right now for us to talk about this stuff. So how can we fight against this radicalization? Do you have hope? How come we don't see more Muslims like you speaking out against this?
I'm a big fan of yours. Do you remember, I don't know how many years ago, I was a public school teacher. And I was in California, and I was, Googling to see what's happening in the schools. And this is way back in 2015 or something. I had run for the Democratic Party. I thought, that's the party for us as moderate, America-loving Muslims. And then I realized the first thing that they wanted me to do was drop my support for Israel. And I'm like, I don't have a problem with Israel. I love my Jewish friends. I came here to live with them in peace. So what you're seeing is not overnight. This guy who's heading your state is not the worst of them. So you can imagine what's coming in the pipeline. And I'm telling you, from the grassroots, we built an organization of Muslims so that we could counter what we were seeing, the Islamization of America. After 9/11, of course, I was the only one who actually spoke up and said, this is bad. This is not Islam. This is not my faith. I don't want to subscribe to CARE and the entire takeover of the mosques in America. It has been happening way before 9/11. They've planned it out. But I'd go to people and organizations and I'd say, listen, I know what they say when the door is shut. I know what they've told me. They told me Muslims and Jews cannot be friends. You can't eat with the Muslims and Jews. But for me as a Muslim, that was the point. I said, okay, they are not following Islam. They're following something else. But my dear friends, that was a long time ago. And in many ways, I'm really sad today to say that they kind of succeeded. They have a mayor that is an Islamist, the Red-Green Alliance. They'll go wherever. They will go with the gay people, the black people. They will find all these vulnerable communities and they will seep in. But here's what I am really afraid of, that 10, 15 years ago when people asked me, like, how many moderate Muslims do you think there are? And I'd say 80% of Muslims in America are moderates. If you ask me today, you know, I'm not saying I've done a polling of this, but I do observe, I see, I travel. I just came back from California 2 weeks ago. I was in California, and we were doing a small event at Skirball Center, and it was called Breaking Bread. Muslims, Jews, and Christians come together. A beautiful event. That's Islam, that we follow Judeo-Christian values. That's what I grew up with. And Shura Council of North America, and majority of the mosques in California, and the Council on American Islamic Relations denounced it, told everyone to boycott it because they could not see a rabbi, a priest, an imam come together and break bread. And nobody spoke up. People were afraid in California. We need what you guys are doing, End Jew Hatred, the Lawfare Project. We need more of what Luke is doing. We need to do this in every state and every city in America. I can't tell you how many Jewish organizations, smaller Jewish organizations, call me because they trust me and they'll say, listen, we can't have our Shabbat, we can't put anything out because we live in, say, Patterson, New Jersey. And they say, we're afraid because we are terrorized by these Islamists. And I want to tell you, don't be terrorized. Be louder, because there are Muslims like me. They are afraid, but they're coming out with me. They are in different states. We have allies for you and for our Christian brothers and sisters that are louder, that are standing out. But you know who stops them? Social media. We have 2 organizations in Texas who've been shouting and talking about Islamism, the Red-Green Alliance. They're telling Muslims the truth. What happens? They get banned. Yes, they get banned on LinkedIn, Twitter, and we are smaller in number. We need to grow as Muslims. We need to be louder too. And when we have these bumps in the way, obstacles in the way, it becomes harder. But I can tell you that if we come together like this in every state and we challenge them, they don't want to hear me. They don't want to hear people like me. That is why they can't even stand us breaking bread. So we need to do this, and we need more journalists to be strong and loud and face the truth. Let's talk about one mullah dead is not the death of an ideology, is it? The ideology that stayed with Al-Qaeda, it was morphing into so many different things that today I see my religion is completely being hijacked. And what frightens me to death today is what I have been sleepless about, that I'm seeing examples, just like I knew the day in California, my principal came to me and said, Anila, you can't have the Holocaust survivor talk to 8th graders because we don't have time. I knew that. That was 2017. I knew something is happening. Jew hatred, America hatred, truth hatred. I knew something was happening. In the same way, today, I'm seeing something happening in the Muslim world in certain places that's an erasure of prophets that are in the Quran. There are randomly Islamists that are powerful in different countries, and of course here in America, that are denying. One of them said there's no Jesus in the Quran. Well, then you're not a Muslim. Now they're saying Islam is, the Quran is I'm telling you, Quran is a Zionist document. Allah has said in the Quran, Bani Israel, people of Yaqub, Jacob alayhi salam, peace be upon him, go unto thine land and live there. He says, Allah says the same thing to Moses. This is your land. Take your people. And no, it wasn't Palestine. There was no Palestine. For God's sake, change and challenge these narratives, because now they are posting Palestine and they are erasing Bani Israel from the Quran. And prophets that are Jewish, Christian, and changing that. And the young people, the Gen Z, the Alpha generation that are sitting in these mosques that I visit, I'm horrified that they're learning that. Yeah, unchecked. If you look at Amazon and the books that they're selling and just go through that, that's what they're doing. They're spreading their propaganda, and it's going to the young people, and they're coming and asking questions like, there's no Bani Israel, there's no Israel in the Quran. Israel is mentioned more than 100 times in the Quran. But Palestine is not. Islam is not Palestine.
That's true.
Islam is way greater than all of that. It brought together the teachings, Judeo-Christian values. And that's why I'm sitting here talking to you, fighting for this since 9/11.
Thank you. Thank you for your brave comments. You know, it seems to me that this is an issue that needs to be worked out within the Muslim community. And people need to recognize that. And it's the same with the so-called Israel-Palestine problem. It's not the Jews, it's not Israel's duty to fix Palestine. To, if an Arab mother in Gaza is okay with her child becoming a suicide bomber, there's nothing that we can do about that. This is an internal issue within the Muslim community that needs to be worked out, which is why we have to empower voices like yours. So thank you for being here. We're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire now. There's a couple questions that I want to ask, and just to be mindful of the time, if we could provide succinct answers. And I was hoping just to get 3 questions from the audience for our panelists, and then we can move on. So, Dr. Glick, you mentioned the FACE Act. I wanted to come back to that. Could you speak to that? Because what I'd like each and every panelist to do after they answer the question is to give our audience an action item. Perhaps pushing for FACE Act's application would be that coming from you.
Yeah, so the FACE Act was a 1994 law. I think most people know the basics of the FACE Act. It's originally was to protect abortion clinics. It's the freedom of access to clinic entrances. It was in 1994 under the Clinton administration. And my case was the first time, I'm sorry, back up. In 1994, in order to get the Republican senators to sign up onto that law, they included protection of houses of worship. So there's this big argument between First Amendment rights. We have the ability to protest as Americans, which we're not challenging. And then there's the ability for people to worship freely in this country, which is one of our fundamental rights. So where free speech crosses over to a violation of the FACE Act is when somebody is impeding our ability to worship at a synagogue. And again, the government moves super duper slowly, but the fact that the Department of Justice used our case as the first time to bring federal charges against 6 individuals and 2 Muslim terrorist organizations, AMP and PAL, civil charges. So the United States government is suing them in federal court. We're hoping there will be a criminal charges as well, which we talked about them, Mandami, his overriding of what 95% of New Yorkers agree that there should be a protection zone around synagogues and schools and churches. The FACE Act on a federal level can do that with significant penalties for those that violate it. So if we're talking about an action item, please see me after. I'll be around for the next several hours. The FACE Act is, and if we look around, what is the one action that we can take that can give the most protection to Jews, Christians, Muslims, to protect houses of worship? It's the FACE Act, and we're at a critical junction within that movement right now. We have the Trump administration, which we don't know what's going to happen in the midterms, but the fact that the federal government is looking at this, taking real action, using my case, and it's blatant, mine is black and white, that's a tremendous, powerful tool that we can all use.
Thank you. David, you recently wrote an article asking why should DEI exist in the first place? And if I can quote you, you wrote, DEI-style programming exists almost entirely without oversight or accountability. It is a tool, or could be a tool, for manipulation and malfeasance and fomenting extremism and Jew hatred. Could you please expand on that and also give our audience an action item they can take home today?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say that as someone who's African American, I'm not of the theory that we need to end DEI. I think the DEI needs to be completely overhauled and revisited. The key problem, as we all know, is that DEI penalizes Jews. The original sin of DEI is that it excluded, it penalized, and it put disproportionate blame on Jews for the supposed discrimination and oppression of others. So I think that's what when I wrote that piece, I'm talking about this idea that DEI exists as a system of hierarchies, as a system of oppressor and the oppressed, of a victim and perpetrator. And whenever we speak in the culture and historically about victims or perpetrators, we always know who is going to be maligned as the perpetrator. Jews have always been the convenient destination of all of our notions of perpetrators. So when I see DEI, my way of thinking about DEI is that, again, October 7th, as I like to say, was the first major stress test of DEI, and it failed spectacularly. It failed because at the exact moment when a minority group needed protections on every single level, not only were they denied those protections, but they were blamed. They were blamed for causing them in the first place, and that would never ever happen with any other minority. I know because I am another minority. And I think with what I would say about taking away, I think what we really need to do is begin to, of course it goes to stop being silent. I mean, my inability to be silent is because I see the injustice from the sides of somebody who's of multiple identities. I know that what I see happening to Jews today would never be tolerated for any other minority group, including the ones that I am part of. But I would also say what makes me most frustrated is this idea that Jews are constantly questioned, interrogated about their feelings of anti-Semitism. If folks say that they believe something is anti-Semitic, They're constantly made to prove it. They're constantly made to justify it. They're constantly made to explain it. Stop explaining. Stop proving. Stop justifying. Because the way this system works, and I'll stop for a second, I know what the system works, is that as a black person, I know that if I accuse somebody of racism, I will be immediately believed. The idea is you believe the victim. You believe the victim. Only Jews have to explain it. Zohar Mamdani was anti-Semitic because a Jew believed he was anti-Semitic. That's it. That's the only thing that matters. Just like if someone believed he was racist, it would be the same thing. And the last thing I will say is when people are asking questions, I often hear people talking about, Jews are white colonizers, and we take the bait. Stop taking the bait. We take this debate of trying to explain, well, we have black Jews, we have Ethiopian Jews, we have Mizrahi Jews, we have Sephardic Jews. No. When people ask me that, number one, I don't need to justify whether or not Jews are white. I'm a Jew and I'm not white. It's obvious. But more importantly, I say, why are you asking that? What are your motivations? Why does it matter? Instead of justifying and answering our exterminators with the information they're going to use to try to exterminate us, we need to ask them, this is what I ask everybody, what are your motivations behind this question? And I'll end by saying, because whenever I hear anyone going down the trail of Jews and race, it always inevitably ends up as a justification for Hamas and October 7th, and a justification for killing Jews. Stop indulging your exterminators with the questions and with the ammunition that they want to use to exterminate you.
Very, very well said. Thank you. Luke, I'm going to ask you a very hard question, too. I'll start by saying, and I'm not a Christian theologist, but to me it's pretty obvious that Tucker and people like him are distorting Christian belief and faith for political agendas. And, the greatest spiritual alliance this world has ever seen is that between the Jews and the Christians. And that is what they are trying to break. And the Groypers and the grifters and all those names. And, I call them the Antichrist because that's literally what they are. They are calling God a liar, right? God made a covenant with Abraham. He made a covenant with the Jewish people. And if you say that God has broken that covenant, you are calling God a liar. Right. But on the reverse, we have an issue. Because we have Christians that believe in the covenant who are then, challenged by Jews that say, well, you only want us to go back to Israel so we can all die in the apocalypse. We don't really trust you. Right. So how do you respond to those in the Jewish community that are suspicious of your intentions? Because we don't have time for that. We need to align.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, one I get often. Actually, Jeffrey Sachs, the stooge for the Chinese, was on Tucker that last week, and he said, the Christian Zionists, they're actually anti-Semites because the Book of Revelation says that they just want us to go back to the land so that the second coming can happen. And I'm like, dude, that's not in the Book of Revelation. Like the only people that tell me that the Christians want the Jews to go back to the land and die in the apocalypse is Jews. Because it's not actually in the New Testament. There is a passage in the Bible that talks about the nation shall come against Jerusalem, and then God will save the Jews, and the Messiah shows up. That's in the book of Zechariah. That's not in my part. I mean, I agree it's in my part, but it's like in your part on the Jew side. And I'm like, okay, read your Bible. Literally, just read your Bible. It's all there. Everything you need to know. But there isn't this expectation. There is and one of the motivating factors for me is that there's a verse in the New Testament that says, and speaking to Gentiles, and I'm not Jewish, I'm a proper European mud, that the root sustains you, you don't sustain the root. And the root in that passage is Israel and the Jewish people. okay? That is in the New Testament. And that is, to me, the command that's all over the place in the New Testament to stand with Israel and the Jews. And so that is what I do. And that is what I talk about. And there's no other intent other than to be faithful to what the teachings of the Bible says. That is it. And there's a ton of polling that shows that people who read the Bible more, who go to church more, are more likely to support Israel. There's actually, if your pastor speaks out in support of Israel, or even mentions positively Jews and Israel, there's a 91% chance that you will be supportive of Israel. How insane is that? That is a good statistic. And so I think it's as Bishop Stern, I don't know if he's still here, but he's been bringing pastors. Those pastors then come home. They start speaking in their churches. There's tons of people who are now coming to faith. And when I get asked, Luke, what's your advice to young Christians on Israel and whatever? I'm like, read your Bible. It's all in there. At the end of the story, the Jews are there. We get this story from the Jews. Jesus says, picks up the language of Jeremiah in talking about, I will take away their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Jesus picks up that language. It is all rooted in Jewish theology. And so to me, it's like, don't be afraid of us.
Yeah, we spend so much time, though, educating about anti-Semitism, and I think what we really need to do is to go to Christian schools and to go into churches and to talk with pastors and talk about the very real and imminent threat that we both face, which is radical Islam. You know, it's negative campaigning, right? It's a lot harder to get someone to love Israel, to love a foreign state that perhaps they've never been, they don't really feel connected to, than it is to get, a Christian mother in Ohio to understand, see that young lady walking down the streets of Belgium with a t-shirt and shorts on that looks exactly like your daughter being surrounded by, an Islamist, gang that wants to rape her and is shouting at her. That is here right now. It's not coming here, it's here. But I don't understand. There are Christians that are being slaughtered. In Sudan, there are Christians that are being locked in churches and burnt alive in Nigeria. There are Christian women who are having their babies taken out of their arms and they are being literally hacked to pieces in front of them. It is happening now. It is happening every day. And the Christian community, except for you and except for a couple people, are relatively silent about it. Why?
Man, Brooke, listen. So that Red-Green Alliance that Anila talked about, and I talk about a good deal, is real. And the rabbi brought up that what they're against is the people of the Bible, right? And so, Karl Marx was asked, who in the UK do you hate the most? And it was a guy named Spurgeon, Charles Spurgeon, who was a preacher. He was a famous preacher in the UK. And why did Karl Marx hate him the most? Was because he was going into the working class neighborhoods and bringing people to Christ, and as a result, taking away his ammunition. And then right now, there's a saying amongst the jihadis, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. When I started doing this work, there was 500,000 Christians in northern Iraq. There's actually more Christians in Israel right now than are left in Iraq. And that is in 12 years. That is nuts, okay? And I have no good answer for why I cannot get Christians to care about that. I have spent the last good part of the last almost 20 years trying to get Christians to care about Christians other places. And I remember a pastor said to me, I was like, dude, you got the Muslims will stand with the Muslims and the Jews will stand with the Jews, but with the Christians, are we not going to stand with Christians? He goes, Luke, we can't allow Christianity to become tribal. And I'm like, dude, but there's a verse that says, do good to all men, but first the household of faith. We're supposed to stand with ourselves. Yeah, but Luke, that doesn't matter. I'm like, I have no idea. On that, I have no idea. But I do have an action item, because that's where I got to go. I know. All right. So I need every one of your Gen Z fighters who wants to storm the castles with me. I got so many opportunities. There's a debate coming up in Florida, a gubernatorial debate, that fish stick and is going to be there. I want to make sure we outnumber the Groypers at that event. I need your Gen Z, okay? After this, if you want to come talk to me. I want to storm the castles. There's a lot of them to storm. Let's do it together. I need that.
Amazing. Thank you. We will give you those numbers. So, Anila, just to close off our panel, if you can just address briefly where the radicalization is coming from. You mentioned CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is a Muslim Brotherhood front group and also an unindicted co-conspirator in a terror financing trial, and in some states in America now, a designated terrorist group, thank God. You know, I mentioned this is an issue for the Muslim community, but what can we do to stop the radicalization that is occurring, and what is your action item for this community?
A very important question. First of all, I think we should have many more events like this around the US, for sure. Because when you stand tall in front of these bullies and you invade their castles or whatever they've built, that's when they know, oh my gosh, okay, the Christians are uniting with the Jewish people and everybody else, and Muslims are there as well. I may be one here, but I have a team, and you'll be happy to hear. It's grown since October 7th, because for us, we stood with the Jewish people, but we were alone. And we had to, half my board had resigned. So we had to build anti-Islamist fighters. Fighting bigotry from within is the most difficult task, I can tell you, because their funding, the Islamists have a huge, huge funding network, and we have not even cut half of it. You know, you talked about Qatar. Tucker Carlson was in Qatar. You know, why did he go there? And why are we listening to him? We need to also listen to the right people. When you stop following these haters and you start following people like us, empowering us on social media, that's going to be really important. Also, July 13th, I invite all of you to come to DC. Just like Luke said, we need young people. You'll be meeting Muslims who went to Israel in December. You know, they may not have been pro-Israel. They wanted to check their bias. They came back fighting anti-Semitism. And they will be there in DC. So come and meet with them. Those are your allies. I say to the Christian world that once upon a time, Christians and Muslims were together, fighting Christian persecution. But this whole ideology, Islam has been hijacked, that they want to force convert people. And this is not new. It's been happening for a really long time, that these organizations like CARE that have NGOs, they have built these political action committees where they fund people like Mamdani, and then they have this whole invisible Hamas-like network they call the New Leadership Foundation, and you have these young Muslims sitting in cafes that are very cool, talking about Islamism. They are totally radicalized, and we need to stop those NGOs that are being funded. I ask you to look up Nihad Awad. He's the head of the Council on American Islamic Relations. We're women, we're American women, and I'm a Muslim woman. He has sexually harassed a Muslim woman board member, but there is no accountability. He is still the head of this evil organization, and I want more people, lawyers, to come out and investigate him. Why did he get to silence this Muslim woman who had all the evidence of the foreign funding coming into the Council on American Islamic Relations? I asked Rula Alush, she's also with CARE, tell us about that check that you got from Kuwait. Where is the funding coming from, and why aren't we investigating them? All of these new organizations that are springing up, we need more accountability on NGOs. And also in New York, you have a huge Islamist problem. There are very few mosques where I can go and feel safe. I want to tell you what the Muslims who are young people and they're in their 30s, they have kids. And they're realizing, oh my gosh, like these people were crazy. It was okay to listen to the Muslim Students Association when we were younger, but no, not now, because we're seeing the truth. We like America and American prosperity. Those young people have been calling us and saying, do you know, we don't want to go to the mosque, or if we go to the mosque on Friday, we pray and we get the hell out. This is from a Muslim. So what are they saying in Arabic, in Urdu, in whatever language? We need to know what they're saying, and you can do that by going into your neighborhood mosque. The mosque should be open to everybody, just like a church is, just like a synagogue is. So let's do that. Let's check on our neighbors and say we're here.
That's interesting. And I just want to emphasize, we're going to send out the names of the Muslim influencers that are anti-radical Islam for everybody to promote and to follow and to spread. I think that's a very important action item. And Dr. Glick had one more thing.
Yeah, I wanted to end with the action item. And my action item for everybody is just stop being afraid. We've got to stop. There's been this, the emasculation of the American man, the American Jewish man. We look at what goes on. The Israeli army, you can put 5 Israeli soldiers together. They can take out any terrorist in the world. But a Jew, is going to just take out their cell phone and record. And I can tell you from my own experience, there was a point in time when I was looking at 10 years in prison. The prosecutors came to me and said, we want you to take PTI, pretrial intervention, which would have been basically, it was a tacit admission that I had done something wrong. And I don't know if anybody in this room has been arrested, probably Luke once or twice, I don't know if I had to guess. If anybody's been arrested, it's a terrifying experience, but we have to make a decision. We have to believe God is on our side and stop being afraid. There are resources for us. One of the things that we're working on, I can't tell you how many cases have come to me of people that are in similar situations, that I've had. We've put together, we have PR teams ready to go, we have social media, we have lawyers, we have everything. But what we have is all these people said to me, thank you for not being afraid, and I'm asking everybody else, stand up, don't be afraid, because if we don't stand up, we're in real trouble.
Thank you. Thank you to the amazing panelists. They will stick around, I hope, to answer questions, so we don't have time for that. I just forgot to mention, and my fault, our incredible Jane Zirkle, who's over there doing an interview. She came to us from Steve Bannon, and she also used to run Rudy Giuliani's campaign, and now she's the comms director for Lawfare. So we're very happy to have her. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much, and as I promised you all, we're going to end each panel with an action. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but I'm an Iranian Jew, so running late is okay. But first of all, I just must say, these 4 panelists, from Moshe to Luke to Anila, is everybody over here? Moshe, Luke, you are all incredible. Anila, David, the second that I got on the phone and called and asked them to make the time to come to this event when we decided to hold this summit, they all changed their schedules around. One of them, it changed the flight. One flew from Pakistan yesterday. So thank you. Now, in terms of action, we heard what extremism brings. We heard what we're up against. So one action that I want everybody here to take, Larkin, if you're on the screen, Larkin, our amazing Larkin, who handles a lot of our tech, End Jew Hatred has been working on an End Hate in Education initiative. End Hate in Education, over the past year, we have been meeting and brainstorming with so many of the leaders in education. We have Karen Feldman from NYCPS Alliance here, who has been a huge source of information for us, Karen. Working with NAVI, North American Values Institute, whoever isn't familiar with their work, incredible. Stand With Us K-12 Center, K-12 Fairness Center. So the End Hate in Education initiative is going to give us all tools to be activists, parents, students. Please scan, everyone, take out your phone, scan this QR code. Scan the QR code. It's going to take you to the End Hate in Education initiative landing page. Take the pledge number 1. And the pledge isn't just merely inputting your name. The pledge means that you're going to take a stand. If you're a parent, if you're a student, if you're just any citizen that wants to ensure that extremism doesn't take over, this End Hate in Education initiative will give you the tools to do so. We have a parent guidebook that is a result of loads of conversations with experts, administrators, teachers, parents. All of their input went into a parent activist guidebook. It spans from Board of Education, how to run for your Board of Education, how to ensure curriculum transparency. We want to know what our 10th graders are being taught in their social studies class. So we give you the tools how to look in your own district, find out what that curriculum is, so that you can let us know then if there's some sort of troubling word or some subject that you might want End Jew Hatred to work with their partners on to ensure that indoctrination is not happening in our K-12 schools. Because everyone, we see what's going on college campuses. We need to make sure that these children aren't lost by the time they get to college campuses. That is a huge issue that we're facing now, and this End Hate in Education initiative is a real propelling factor how we're going to fight it. So now, we spoke a lot, take a 5 to 10 minute break, and we have an amazing panel coming up next, Unmasking Hate, Exposing Extremism. In about 5 to 10 minutes, please take your seats again, and we're gonna start. Thanks, everybody.